Finally. Of course.
That's okay.
So it's going in the background. Yeah.
Good morning, my denominator. Don and Sharon here. Welcome. Good turnout. Glad to see you all. We're going to do this just like we do in Hawaii. We're going to talk story. We'll put slides up there, and if you have any questions, just raise your hand. I'll repeat the questions so our people on Zoom can listen as well. And Berlin, American Church in Berlin, been there since 1865. The organization Sharon and I are board members on has been working with that church since 1865, and we continue to do that. But our love for Europe in general started back in the mid-70s. We arrived in 1973 to Frankfurt, Germany. I was in a small 4-airplane special operations Air Force organization that supported all the NATO special forces. And during that 4-year tour, our daughter was born in 1974, and we toured all of Europe that we could. Obviously, there was an iron curtain that separated a good portion of the East Bloc and Berlin in 160 miles of what is now Germany, former East Germany. But we fell in love with Europe. We had a caravan, we would travel, we'd go all the way down to the Mediterranean, we'd go all the way up to the Baltic and North Sea, and just fell in love with it. Well, my Air Force career ended in 1988, and even though I got promoted, they wouldn't let me fly anymore, and I said, what's this? I had interviewed with a couple of the airlines and went down to Miami, interviewed with Pan Am, if you can remember back that far. And in that interview process, they said, yeah, we have an operation in Berlin. About 200 people work there, and I said, what's my opportunity if I'm successful in this interview process of going there? And they said, we'll guarantee you go to Berlin. I called Sharon that night, and I says, guess what? We have an operation in Berlin, and we could go there.
My comment was, I'll get packed.
Yeah, so that opportunity, a blessing, to be truthful. So we packed everything up. We sold everything in the U.S. Our intent was to go over there and work the rest of our working lives. At that time, as a pilot, you had to retire at age 60, so I had about 15 years to go, and we were certainly looking forward to that. So that took us when the wall. That took us to.
Don, just a second. The cursor has to be over here.
Anyway,
Yeah, so no.
this is where we worshiped from 1988 till the end of 1991. This is called the Dorfkirche. That was originally laid out by Napoleon in 1600s. It was rebuilt in 1865. That little Dorfkirche set in the church cemetery of a larger church, a much larger church, German church. We rented that from them to use for our Sunday services. Fellowships always had to be held outside, winter and summer, because there wasn't any more room inside. It would hold about 65 of us on a good Sunday. Had a very small little organ in it. We were perfectly happy. That was our family away from home in Berlin. The problem was, obviously, in 1989, while we were there, the wall, the Iron Curtain disappeared. And that's the three of us chipping away at the wall. After the presentation, if you'd like pieces of the Berlin Wall, we have them up here on the table for you. What's left of our collection.
It's first come, first served, because it's very limited. I'll move out of the way.
So, at that same time, obviously, Berlin was not the capital of Germany. Bonn was. When the wall came down and the government decided to move the capital back to Berlin, rightfully so. And so, more central location was needed. The little Dorfkirche that we showed pictures of was in the southwest corner of West Berlin, which was the American sector. It made sense for us to worship down there. We were primarily at that time military, consulate, embassy folks, Americans working in Berlin. So southwest corner was a good location for us. The British had the central part of West Berlin, the French had the north part of West Berlin, and obviously the Russians had all of East Berlin. As West Berlin citizens, we had access to East Berlin. Our passports had us stamped in as West Berliners. So we had unlimited access to East Berlin. We couldn't go through Checkpoint Charlie, but we could go through any of the other two points of crossing. So.
And that was the scariest.
You're live. Just hold it close.
That was the scariest thing I ever did, going into East Berlin the very first time. Because I had to go, as Don said, we had to go, couldn't go through Checkpoint Charlie, so I had to do the German side. And I had to take a bus to get to the train to get to East Berlin, and guards walking up and down by all the trains, going upstairs. There were guards, East German guards or police all over the place. And so I just knew they were going to snatch me and throw me in the gulag or something. But then I had some American friends that were military wives, so I was meeting them, and they could just drive across. And it was fine during the time I was there, and then it was time to get back on the train to go home. And I get on, and once again, here are these guards, and it takes off, and I reach into my passport, and you could not take out East German money.
You had to spend it all.
You had to spend it all, and which I didn't do. But anyway, I stuck it in my passport, and I reach in my purse to get my passport, to get my passport out, and all of a sudden I look at, oh my God, I'm gonna be thrown in I'm not gonna be in East Berlin till I die. And so I'm tucking it someplace. They didn't pay any attention to me. All they did, because I took the money out, showed my passport, and I said, I'm never going back to East Berlin. It's just too scary. Obviously, I did go, but it was one of the strangest, weirdest, scariest time I've ever had going back and forth to Berlin, or East Berlin. Okay, That's
Sharon, why would you want to go to East Berlin? What was the reason?
Shopping was great.
Oh.
Things like cameras and binoculars were East German products that were of quality. The women, to make any money at all, would put together feather deckers, which are quilts, and handmade items, embroidery, that kind of handcrafted stuff was excellent buys over there. So shopping was a reason. And they always had Alexanderplatz, which sits in the center of East Berlin at that time, had a great soups cafe. You could go there and have soups, and they was wonderful. But yeah, moving on. So until 1999, the American Church in Berlin still worshiped down there in the southwest corner in the Dorfkirche. Well, they wanted to, the big church there that we rented that from wanted to remodel it again. Oops, we don't have a place to worship. We couldn't use their church because they already had 2 services going on a Sunday, so on and so forth. So the congregation at that time started looking around for another more central location. They wanted to be available to all of Berlin, not just the American sector. So they went searching for a situation in a central and accessible area. The church is to facilitate its role as a hub for expatriates and interfaith connection with other religions and be more of a piece of Berlin. So we were offered the Lutherkirche. How appropriate, the Lutheran Church in more central Berlin. It's hard to see up there, but if you look around, you'll see a number of yellow sort of bricks. That's all war damage from World War I and World War II. This church started its building process in 1896, finished it in 1904. And at that time, in 1999, the congregation in that church was down to about 20 members. To belong to a church in Germany, you pay a tax. So you can be married, buried, and baptized in a church. So if you want a pay raise, you just stop being a member of a church. So this church was centrally located. I'll show you here on the map. Let's see if I can point to this. That's the location of the church. Those of you that have been to Berlin, that's the Tiergarten. This is the Brandenburg Gate, Potsdamer Platz, all that new construction that took place. The wall actually came down through here. So this was in the former West Berlin. It's about a 5-minute drive to Kurfürstendamm, which used to be the hub of West Berlin for shopping and hotels and stuff. And like I say, about a 10-minute drive from the Tiergarten and a 15-minute drive in traffic up to Brandenburg Gate. Okay, you all familiar with that? The horse is looking eastward. This is a better picture of it. It's a majestic Lutheran church. Like I say, 130 years old now. Huge spire right there. You can't see it, I'll show you a better picture. But right back there is a U-Bahn, public transportation track, elevated. And when we looked at that church in 1999, and by then Sharon and I weren't on the board until 2001, they said, if you use this church, you'll rent it for 5 years and decide whether you like it or not. To rent it, you're going to pay us $50,000 euros a year to repair this thing, this big spire with the church bells in it and everything else and the clock on it, for fear that it's going to fall down on the tracks. So whoever's going to take over this church has got to pay for that reconstruction. So we thought that was a good deal. 5 years, we'll find out whether we really need this thing or not, whether it's going to work for us. They also promised us across the street from this U-Bahn track, the Gemeindehaus, community house, which had the apartment for the pastor. It had meeting rooms. It had a small sanctuary, because if you go to one of these churches in the wintertime, you're going to get your feet cold, if not your butt cold, I guarantee you. and we'll talk about that a little more too. So, the American Church in Berlin opted to rent this for 5 years, decide whether they wanted it. The problem with it, and they promised us the Gemeindehaus across the street whenever that pastor passed away or quit being a pastor for that congregation of 20 folks. Well, he is still alive and living, so we don't have that.
He's never gonna die.
He's never going to die. Okay, so we sorely missed that. When we took it over, it was called Needle Park. It sits in a triangular area that is surrounded by not only the U-Bahn track behind it, but also major thoroughfares. So, yeah, go ahead.
It's called Needle Park. That's not its real name, because there's a lot of druggies that shoot up. So part of the process of doing things for the church was going out and picking up the syringes.
So when we took it over, it was in pretty bad shape. But here's Luther making his proclamations. That's part of the front of the church. You can't see it on this picture, but I'll show you on a later picture. That is Christ on the west side of the building, one of the sculptures there. And you'll notice that he has no hands. They were lost in the wars as battles and never rebuilt. So we always call it God's work in our hands. So that fits. When we took it over, the church had been, the bricks and all that stuff had been painted with lead paint. Years ago, after the war, 1950s era, that lead paint was, so we had to, because of children especially, strip all that off by hand with drills and wire brushes, and that happens to be Pastor Ben Colbert on the ladder repainting that at that time. There's and the doors look like prison doors, so we redid all that. And Sharon and I were going over there every summer, as we still do. We spend 3 to 6 weeks over there in the summertime working with the church. And I mean to tell you, everybody pitched in. It was quite an effort to clean the place up, mow the grass. You can again see some more battle damage from the wars. All the windows were gone, of course, and whoever put the windows in the 50s sure picked the wrong ones. Another thing they didn't do when they rebuilt the church was it has, and I'll show you the sanctuary, used to have a balcony all the way around. Well, the forced heat comes up on the walls, and if you didn't have the balcony, it just all went to 55-foot ceiling. So it was at least 20 degrees warmer up there than it was on the concrete floor that you put your feet on. So that was a problem. So this is a Krump patent. As you can see, I put some pieces of wood over, and Sharon and I spent hours. These are little styrofoam blocks and little screws to hold them to those patent, and they're still there. That was 2009, so it's coming up on 20 years now, and it's still holding up. But you can get a glimpse here of some of the water damage, and we'll talk more about that. But all this had to be repainted, all that brickwork, and we did that on numerous occasions. Another outside, this was the altar area when we took over the church, not very appealing. Again, lead paint, and so that had to be redone. So we did a redo on that and turned it into what we consider very functional and useful today. Again, here was that U-Bahn track. You can see the spire there, and they were afraid it was going to fall over. And what's nice about that U-Bahn track is there's a stop right beyond the church, so easy to get to. I said it's on a triangular piece of ground, nice park now. We cleaned it up, no longer called Needle Park. Matter of fact, the neighborhood in 1999 was primarily Muslim. When the wars were over, there weren't many male Germans left, so they brought in a lot of Turkish laborers, and guess what? The Turks like that better than Turkey, so they've settled, and it's becoming gentrified. This area is now becoming sort of more popular for young people. But that U-Bahn track goes right by, let's see if you can see it. No, you can't see it in the picture. But we put that sign up, and everybody that rides on the U-Bahn gets to see that sign. So that's our best advertisement ever. What I didn't point out was when they rebuilt the church, they never put that spire back up. There's a matching one on the other side, but this is an east view of the church. Well, relatively good-sized sanctuary. I'll show you here in a picture. Easily seats 200 to 300 people in just that area. And you can see here that he's standing about here, the pastor was. So this is the main sanctuary, and off both sides here you can seat another 100 or so. So it's not uncommon to have 300 people. And this is the altar area up here. Diverse congregation. When we were there in the church, mostly Americans or people wanting to, Germans married to Americans, so on and so forth. It has now become about 20% American or American related, and all the rest are refugees, immigrants, or people that want to worship in English instead of, and it's just a pleasure. Lots of baptisms. We have Africans, Indians, Filipinos, a lot of the East Bloc countries, refugees are there, Ukrainians, from all over. And we certainly enjoy it. And let me tell you, this is our new pastor. We started about December. Ryan Bergman. He born and raised in Minnesota. He went to Berlin as a NATO analyst and actually got his divinity degree from Humboldt University, which is in former East Germany. So he's obviously very fluent in German, and he's a real blessing to the congregation. It's one of the baptisms, a lot of fellowship, and like any Lutherans, food's involved. So yeah, that's good friends of ours. They have a gospel choir, obviously, with an African influence. You ought to hear them beat up a song. They really do a great job. Like I said, a very diverse congregation. Some of the confirmants, when we worshiped over there, Eberhard used to come every Sunday because he could speak English. He was obviously very German, but he lived in a garden shack. And he always wore a tie. Children's time, always a great time. You can again see the mix of nationalities in there, but they all worship and speak in English, and that's what they wanted. Another sample of children's time. What I'll point out here is it's a great institution for interns. We typically always have an intern over there assisting the pastor, because so many interns want to do international worship, communities. So it's a great school for them to come over, and we always furnish them housing and settle them in. Confirmants getting some more lessons. Always coffee hour afterwards, and I mean to tell you, coffee hour. It goes, we finish the service by noon. There are people there still at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And yeah, there's never a problem with that. And some of them really get serious about it. This was a service last summer. Sharon and I were there in July. I think it was the last weekend in July. And that's a slack period in Berlin and Europe in general, because everybody's on vacation. July and August are vacation months over there. So we always are there to help. But this particular service had 2 adult baptisms and had 191 people in. This young man, well, I'll point it out. This young man was former Buddhist, and this young man was former Muslim. And there'll be 4 more adult baptisms this Sunday, and there'll be 4 confirmations on May 24th on Pentecost Sunday, which is. Oh, and after this Indian fellow's baptism, and by the way, whenever there's a baptism there that's one of the nationalities that isn't English, all the people in the congregation wear their typical clothes. The Indians, the Filipinos, So after this particular service, instead of coffee hour, they brought in a Indian buffet. Wow. Was that great? Yeah, nothing wrong with that. The kitchen at the American Church in Berlin, which we built, is smaller than any of our bathrooms. Oh. Yeah, and but we get by. And imagine about 40 people in that dress in a service. Yeah. This is one of the outreach efforts we have there. It's a learning cafe each Monday evening, and snacks are involved, obviously. And it's for people that want to learn English, people that want to learn German, refugees, for instance. What are the legal hurdles you have to go across to be a refugee in Berlin? How do you get around? How transportation, all this sort of thing. And this group of, for instance, he's a lawyer, and he has all the legal ramifications you have to go through as you become an immigrant. Her daughter and son-in-law became members of the congregation. They were both German, and she wanted to learn English. So she's an English-German school teacher, yada, yada, yada. So that happens as an outreach for the community. And they, as you can tell, they have a good time. Youth choir, we have one of those. And again, all nationalities, and as you can tell, that some people pay more attention than others. One of our biggest outreach programs is, can you translate? Is Gita in here? No?
Yeah.
Oh, translate, vielleicht?
Life and Sailor for your body and soul.
Exactly. Every Friday, starting at about 7 o'clock in the morning till 7 o'clock at night, this congregation puts on a food program for the needy.
But it doesn't start until the afternoon, because all the setup, it takes that long to get it ready for 1 o'clock.
But what people can do is line up their grocery carts and first come, first serve. So that's important if you're going through a food bank. True. That is our old beat-up truck van that we use to collect the groceries on a Friday morning. We go around to the distribution centers, the major supermarkets, because in Germany, all your stores are closed on a Sunday. So there's a lot of perishable goods, especially produce, bakery goods, some dairy products that you want to get rid of. So they go around with this beat-up old van, and you can see that it was donated by the Rotary Club in Berlin, the Rotary Club in Glenville, New York, and the Rotary Foundation. Augsburg Lutheran Church in Raleigh, North Carolina is one of our board members. He got on that. But we wore that sucker out, as you can tell. We just sold it for 1,900 euros for parts, and we just bought not a new van, but a Ford van to replace it. And that van converts into a 15-person van if we want to go down to Wittenberg to visit Luther's church or make youth programs or trips like that. This is a Friday morning unloading this stuff, and it takes a dozen people to set this up throughout the day. And you can see the people coming through there to collect their groceries, and everybody's vetted in this food program. It's not like it's a handout to anybody that wants to walk in. These people have to be registered with the social system, and they actually pay 2 euros per family unit So they got a little skin in the game, if you will, but that also pays for our gas for the van and stuff like that. As I said, they line up there early in the day, sometimes before noon. This is what it looks like inside the church. You can see the produce, you can see bakery products over here, and what you can't see perhaps is all the other stuff underneath the tables. As we empty these boxes on top, we obviously roll them up. So Sharon and I get involved in that. You can see the seasonal worker there. It's a great way to spend a Friday afternoon and evening. And you can still see my styrofoam, yeah.
The side that I'm working is the bakery.
There's a lot of sweet tarts that come through. Back to the heating of this place. When we first took the church over in 2001, it was an oil-fired forced air system. Big furnace down below in the basement, and as I said, all the heat came up and registered up against the wall, so it wasn't doing any good. To heat the church on a cold winter Sunday morning was over $500 of heating oil. Well, our organization that Sharon and I are members of raised some money so that we convert to gas. Wonderful, very efficient, took it down to about $125 a Sunday. Well, now, of course, where did that gas come from? Sorry. So we've cut down the temperature, and again, it's a diverse culture, wide community it serves, involvement, multicultural members. What I didn't mention was not only is 80% of the congregation non-American, but they come from about 30 different denominations. We have every denomination you can imagine in there.
Some we didn't even know existed.
Yeah, and once in a while they put their spin on the service, which the pastor enjoys doing. So we honor those diversities. Every spring we have a street fair. As I said, the neighbors really enjoy us being there. One, we cleaned up the park, we cleaned up that area for them. They actually keep an eye on our church for us, even the Muslims. There's places to sit out in front of the church, and they'll let us know if they see any graffiti or see any homeless trying to bed down next to the church or anything like that. And we give balloons out to the kids. We have some of the nationalities put on dances for them, entertainment. It's also a flea market. You can bring your stuff and try to sell it off and raise funds. Let me get to that story. This is when we were there. We needed new communion ware, and we're going to have to buy it. So the lady said, well, we'll put on a spaghetti supper. That always makes money. And us guys says, we'll put on a ballet. So we all got dressed up. Sharon, go ahead. Yeah, this is our friend Kumar. He's very Indian, very German, American school teacher. He was with the, he was a spy. And yeah, the guy you can't see was the pastor. And the gals made us all these tutus and the makeup.
Yeah.
Go ahead and tell Kumar with the makeup, the black fella.
I forgot about it.
Yeah, couldn't get enough rouge on him.
Kumar was very hard to get makeup on and that you would see. But he'd look and say, more. So he probably had to take a whole jar of cleansing cream to get the amount of makeup that he had on his face off.
Kumar is still in that congregation 35 years later. His children, two daughters and a son. He has become a deacon in the church, and he has carried us through in our absence of a full-time pastor. His one daughter is now teaching confirmation at the ACB. Their son is down in Vienna, Austria, and he's the treasurer for a church that our organization supports. We support 3 churches in Europe. The American Church in Paris. If you've ever been to Paris and been to that church, it's Yeah, I'd highly recommend it. American Church in Berlin and the Vienna Community Church in Vienna. So we just had our spring meeting last year in Vienna, and yeah. So those three churches, if you're ever in Europe, come see us and we'll tell you how to find them. Thanksgiving is not a German holiday, obviously, but for Americans it is. So we push back the pews and we bring out the tables and we haul in the food, and we have a Thanksgiving service with music and entertainment and speakers and things like that. And we've been there for a couple of those, and certainly worthwhile. Get the youth involved in serving the food. It's a buffet style, and take your plate back to your table. This was one of the times that Sharon and I were there. That was the ambassador to Germany, John Kornblum at that time. And
he was my dinner partner.
so, yeah, a good time had by all. By the way, the American ambassador to Germany right now doesn't attend our church because he's Jewish. That big hit, I'm sure. We have soup suppers too, and those are always well attended. And that's a dear friend of ours and the pastor's wife. Again, as we draw to the end, the church welcomes members from many international congregations or backgrounds, and obviously reflects Berlin's demographics and fosters an inclusive environment. What you can't, maybe you can see this. That's the major dome in Berlin, a big cathedral on Museum Island, if you've ever been to Berlin. And every winter we hold a joint concert there, free, for thousands of people. It's our choir, and near what used to be our church in Southwest Berlin is the it's the John F. Kennedy School. It's a German-American school that was formed after World War II and named after John F. Kennedy. It's a German school, but that's where our daughter attended for 3 years. The students, half of the students' mother tongue was English, and half the students' mother tongue was German. And within 1 year, our daughter had to take any or all courses in German. So she had 1 year to be fluent in German. And it's a well-respected school. Matter of fact, the Germans, it's a prized possession to get your child into that school. But on Christmas time, the joint choir in between the American Church in Berlin and the John F. Kennedy School puts on a wonderful, wonderful Christmas concert. Let's see, it's 90 to 100 member choir and a like number in the orchestra. And the choir can be joined by alumni from the school, which makes it really kind of neat, and the orchestra. And it's a real a great event to attend if you're ever over there at Christmas time for the Christmas marts. Again, things like our street fair and our lots of Bible study classes, about 3 a week by different people in the congregation, training numerous people on not only English, but helping them with their studies of the Bible. Regular worship services are conducted, obviously. Cultural events take place. Our spring street fair, as I mentioned. And again, American Church has contributed significantly to Berlin's religious diversity, offering space for anybody that wants to worship in English, and we're an open congregation as we are here. Even after coffee hour, about 15 young adults go off and spend Sunday afternoon together as a group. Collaborates with other faiths, as I mentioned, and mutual understanding throughout Berlin of where you could worship in English. But it's all not peaches and cream. Building's 130 years old. That's a terracotta tile roof. As the storms have become more significant here in the US, they've become more significant in Berlin as well. We're getting a lot of wind and hail damage. Now that's 90 feet in the air. To get to any of that, you climb through one of those observation holes, you put a ladder up and you try to see if you can replace that tile. We do have insurance. We put in a claim if there's significant damage that we can't easily repair, and by the way, none of us 80-year-olds are getting on that ladder anymore. But the trouble with the insurance is they have to go get estimates, and they have, for 2 months, it'll end up with a lot of these tiles being gone, blown off. Let me show you one of those tile. That's a 130-year-old terracotta tile. It's as crumbly as potato chips. I mean, to tell you, it's a major problem. To replace that roof is over a $2 million project. In Germany, you can't just have roofers come out and do things. You have to put scaffolding all the way around the building. You have to rent that. It's just a major, major effort. And the organization we're with have raised an endowment, but never enough to cover something like that. Our endowment covers the pastor's expenses. Wherever they decide to worship, they're going to have a pastor, thanks to our organization. But you can imagine if you have, oh, and by the way, when you lose those tiles, the pigeons love coming in there and making a home. And there's a ceiling above what you see inside the sanctuary, and you go up in there, and by the way, it's over 200 steps to get up there. It's just bird dew and everything else, and the rats get up there to eat the bird dew, and oh, it's just a mess. So that's a problem to deal with too. But that causes extensive water damage if you don't get those repaired in a hurry. That's what part of the church looked like this summer, coming down through the walls. Yeah. All right, let me conclude. The American Church in Berlin stands as a testament to history, community, and cultural influence. Its enduring presence enriches Berlin's spiritual landscape and fosters inclusiveness and diversity and faith in the modern metropolis. Other questions? Did I get you out on time? Yes, ma'am.
So you said after 5 years, you had to decide whether you're going to buy it or not. I assume they bought it.
They bought it, and the price after 5 years was $1 Deutschmark. Oh, well, I'm sorry, €1. So we got the church very reasonably, and for that reason, we put in the kitchen. We put in 2 more bathrooms. You imagine 400 people with 2 antique bathrooms. So we put in 2 more. We put in a new sound system. We converted over to gas. Our organization and them raised the money to do that. But we're to the point now that that building is no longer a good investment. We're not, one, it doesn't have, I forgot to mention, it only has 1 classroom in it, and it's a 2nd-story classroom, so there's no place for meetings. You have to heat that classroom. Fortunately, we can do that electrically for confirmants and things like that, but it's just not a good building to continue with. So we're looking for a new location.
So you didn't get that building across the street?
If we ever could get that, that would satisfy some of our needs, but it wouldn't handle. I forgot to mention, last Saturday they had a concert. The acoustics in there are wonderful. So we can rent out for concerts and things like that. Last Saturday, they had 240 people attending a concert with about 60 musicians there. So we do make a little money that way, but again, people walk in and they see that water damage and they think, yeah, but it needs help. And we'll see what happens in the future, but we certainly can't afford to buy a new building. Maybe there'll be another German church. Another option is to share a church with a German congregation that only has 1 service perhaps. So we're looking at that as well. So there's options, but they're always struggling. Another thing I didn't mention is most of these other nationalities aren't used to tithing or used to offerings. They'll give their time and talents, but my goodness, when we first took over that building, a lot of the refugees were limited to where they could travel. They couldn't leave a certain area, or if they did, they had to have special permission and this, that, and the other. So we were having some trouble, and our lawyers got involved on that, allowing them to come to church in central Berlin. So there's many issues they deal with, but they're doing very well. They run a good 150 every Sunday, and like I say, they worship and they have a lot of enjoyment together and fellowship. Yes, Peter?
So you've got this diverse congregation, how do you decide who what tradition the pastor comes from?
It's in our Constitution. It used to be a Lutheran. Now, because of the interconnection of the Protestant faith, our new pastor is Presbyterian or Presbyterian. Yeah, so we can select from there, and it's called committee just like we have here, and we go internationally for that. We just had, well, for 7 years, we had a pastor from, who's now the Lutheran pastor down in Astoria. He and his daughter just spent, they're coming in, they came in Thursday night, spent the night with us, and yeah, he was there for 7 or 8 years, and 2 daughters, and Lyle Miller ordained him in California. And this, at that time, young man's father was a pastor in California at a German congregation down there. So, let me use his real name, Steve, obviously spoke German, but he ended up a pastor in the Virgin Islands, in Norway for 7 or 8 years, and then came to us for 7 or 8 years. So their 2 daughters are fluent in Norwegian and German. They went to the German American school as well. Yeah, and that's how we get pastors to put out a call. And we hope to keep this one for a long time, because not only is he fluent in German, but he understands the German legal systems. And he's fighting for that building across the street, and he's fighting for better, trying to get this church designated as a historical landmark in Berlin. Then you can get money from the government, perhaps, even though we're an American organization. Yeah, good question. Any others?
So did you ever fix the steeple, and how much did it cost?
Yeah, it cost the $250,000, and it's, but they're already complaining about it. That was 25 years ago, so there may be some more work that has to be done on that. But yeah, and the clock still works. I mean, we keep that going. And oftentimes when the sermon starts, so does the train go behind the church. But it's not that bad.
It's an electric thing, so you don't have a lot of noise.
Yeah. But a good location, good central location, works well. Any other questions? Probably kept you longer than we intended to, but enjoyed the time.
So I can imagine getting on that roof. How many tiles did they break just getting up there if they're like potato chips?
Well, yeah, my former office is an old building, but I know the work that's involved.